So in this video lecture is in relation with the previous video lecture about regulatory strategy. That was part 1. This is part 2. We left at this point, evaluate technical data, whether we were reading about the main activities that are involved in creating and achieving a regulatory strategy. So one of those activities is to evaluate the technical data. That technical data can be chemistry, manufacturing, preclinical or clinical data, and it helps to determine the appropriate regulatory procedure and legal status of the product. What stage my product is at, what would be my regulatory procedure, how would I file the documents, and then propose optimal filing, submission and strategy. So you will have to come up with a strategy for submission and filing. Establish frequent contact with the regulatory authority to facilitate compliance. So when you you submit a dossier to a particular regulatory authority, it's not that they accept it or they reject it. They're simply reject it. They can reject it in the first go itself, but they sometimes would also ask for justifications for certain points or observations, and also for certain clarification regarding certain things. And that is where you guys come along and play, that you establish frequent contact with the regulatory authorities. That can be US FDA, CDSCO, to facilitate whatever compliance that is needed. Now, regulatory strategy document. So it is a living document. It is a living document. Why did they say living document? Living का मतलब ही क्या होता है? जीवित. It is a जीवित document. जीवित document. Why? Because we learn a word from grave. Sorry, my apologies. From cradle to grave. This is what we learn. Cradle to grave means the documents from the very beginning, when the idea was born, till it's not that okay, post market approval ho gaya, now we can stop making the document. No, post market approval ke baad bhi the drug is launched, and till the product is cancelled, till your product is cancelled from the market, till then it is going to be all documented. And that is the regulatory strategy document, and that is a living document. So should be a living document that involves as drug development progress and more is learned about the project. So what happens is that when you look at this language, I am never an advocate of mugging up and speaking out, but it should be a living document that evolves as drug development progress. So these three words, evolve is basically an English word. You can write synonyms for it. But drug development progresses is the word that should be there, because drug development in itself is a terminology used here. It's a very vast topic. You can look at my other video lecture series for the same drug development. And more is learned about the product. So it is a living document, just like the documents you have. Your first ever document that would be made would be the hospital's document or the birth certificate, and the last document ever that would be made by your name would be the wills or death certificate or anything related to that will. So since your birth certificate till death certificate, whatever documents are there, it's going to be it's going to be similar to this regulatory strategy document, a living document. Because when you were born, then there'll be another document. After a few years, there'll be Aadhaar card. Then after a few years, PAN card. Then after 18, driving license. Then after 18, voter's ID card. So the list goes on and on. So this is where I'm making a comparison, why it's called as living document. Now it has three main purposes. It is a tracking tool, it is a planning tool, and it is a risk register. So it is three things: tracking tool, planning tool, and risk register. So let's understand why it is known as a tracking tool. So a tracking tool, to summarize, so why it is known as a tracking tool? Tracking tool, to summarize key arrangements reached with health authorities. Okay, key arrangement reach with health authorities. It's a very simple language, nothing rocket science here to understand. So basically, जो tracking tool है, the tracking tool would have, जैसे मान लो ये ट्रैकिंग टूल है हमारा, ट्रैकिंग टूल डॉक्यूमेंट के अंदर बेसिकली क्या रहेंगी, समरीज. अब वो समरीज किस चीज़ के रिगार्डिंग रहेंगी, क्योंकि ट्रैकिंग टूल है तो क्या ट्रैक करेगा वो, द की अरेंजमेंट्स reached with health authorities. Simple as that. Planning tool, that documents timelines and list topics to address future meetings with the health authorities. So it will talk about what it is. Also a planning tool which basically documents timelines and list topics to address the health authorities, and this is known as the planning tool. Tracking tool tracks the key arrangements and it is the summary form of it with the regulatory market. Then lastly, it is risk register. Risk register is mentioned there to record key issues that could impact timeline, cost and commercial value of the project. So risk register, as the word says, would be a risk of what? Risk related to drug, that could be side effect. That is the first thing that comes to your mind. But it also records key issues that could impact timeline. Anything that could anything that could impact the timeline, delaying of my project launching, the cost and commercial value of the project, then it is going to come as then it's going to be registered under risk register. So commercial value of the project indirectly can be affected by the safety and efficacy issues as well. So key components of a regulatory strategy document: summary of relevant guidelines and precedents. Sometimes we have seen when even guidelines fail to tell what to do next, there are some precedents that, okay, in the year 2005 so and so pharmaceutical company had such an observation and that is how they acted on it, and you had a similar observation from the same regulatory authority. Then in that you can also consider that precedent and the relevant guidelines you obviously are going to consider, that is a must. So the summary of those, so these are the key components of a regulatory strategy document. A strategy to optimize product label claims. Whatever your label is claiming, you strategize on optimizing that. Life cycle management, since cradle till grave. So since the idea when the target product profile was made till the very end, the life cycle management, has there been any changes in the drug products manufacturing process, cleaning process, has there been any like recalls in the markets regarding the same, OS, OTs, CAPAs that were taken, all is recorded. A global submission strategy. Now you're going to submit a lot of documents, a lot of dossiers to different agencies of the world. By agencies I mean regulatory bodies. So you need a global submission strategy, and that is also part of the regulatory strategy document. Target submission and approval dates. So you would have some kind of target submission and you would have some approval dates, that is also part of it. Special population and special safety evaluation, self-explanatory. Implications of licensing agreements, regulatory risk, details on exclusivity, accelerated development and approval options, trademark info, a plan for future interaction with the regulatory authorities if you want to meet them. Key product label attributes, what are the attributes of the key product label, and table of advice from regulatory authorities and outstanding committees. Now next subtopic is regulatory strategy during preclinical drug development. Now if you have read my if you have listened to my video regarding drug development, there I have talked in detail about a lot on drug development, and here we are talking about the preclinical phase. Now what happens is, there is this preclinical phase. Okay, here the testing is done on animals. Now next is clinical phase. Once this preclinical phase is done, completed, the next phase that begins after the approval of preclinical phase is the clinical phase. where the trials is conducted on humans. Now, after this clinical phase is completed and approved, there is post-market approval, and finally the drug is launched in the market. So how does regulatory strategy, like where does it stand in preclinical drug development phase? So preclinical phase deals with the preliminary data on chemistry, manufacturing, QC, and stability, because the drug substance and drug product, as the permission of conducting clinical trials totally depends upon the preclinical studies. Therefore regulatory strategy, इसीलिए क्योंकि अगर आपने यहीं पे गड़बड़ कर दी, आपकी ड्रग्स जो कि ह्यूमन पेशेंट तक पहुंच सकती थी बट एनिमल के ट्रायल में ही फेल हो गई, so गया प्रोजेक्ट. So regulatory strategy must focus on assembling appropriate data. This data can be as given here, whether it's regarding the stability of the product, whether it's regarding the quality control of the product, where it's regarding the what actually is the product, the chemistry, the manufacturing process. So assembling the appropriate data that will be helpful to obtain regulatory approval. Similarly, regulatory strategy during clinical phase. So regulatory strategy in this phase deals with the characterization of drug substance, improvement in the manufacturing process, scale up of the product, and testing for consistency and reproducibility, developing and testing newer analytical methods.